I'm often accused of being too doom and gloom. I'm always talking about bad news. And the reason for this should be pretty obvious to anybody who ever watches my shows. It's because there's not a whole lot of reason to be super positive about the way things are going in the world today, the way things are going here in the United States of America. We're facing multiple existential threats. Never in our history have we had this type of polycrisis, as they like to call it, the convergence of multiple existential threats all happening at the same time. This is unprecedented, as I said, and it's something that makes it to where my shows are often doom and gloom. But today we're actually going to be talking about a silver lining. I don't know if you can call it a positive just yet, but hopefully, there's always something potentially good that comes out of strife. We know this. We've seen it throughout our history. One could argue that, for example, the nation of Israel only exists because of World War II, because of the Holocaust. Now, I'm not trying to justify the Holocaust or say, oh, the Holocaust is actually a good thing for the Jews, Tell that to the 6 million plus who were murdered during the Holocaust. But still, there was a positive that came out of it for the Jewish people as a whole, and that's they were able to get their land back. Their nation was returned to them as a result. Again, not trying to justify. I'm just saying that there's always going to be something, even in the worst of situations, there's always a positive that can come from it. And one of the positives that I found, potential positives, is, we're seeing all this food insecurity across the world, including here in the United States. Food shortages, inflation. It's getting harder and harder to just put meat on the table. And this isn't just because of certain events, which we'll talk about. It's also because that's part of the plan. Okay, the powers that be are trying to eliminate meat as an option for the regular folks. Now, they, of course, the elite globalist elite cabal, they will all be eating steak and chicken and salmon and whatever. But they don't want us to, because apparently it's bad for the environment. It also makes it to where they have more control over us. And that's the real, I guess you could say, driving force behind this push to try to eliminate cows and chickens and eggs and everything else. It's all manufactured. Every crisis we're seeing, from bird flu to the egg shortages, the plants going up in flames, it's all just part of their plan. And you might say that makes me a conspiracy theorist for saying it. You got me. I didn't used to be, but now I realize there are conspiracies, and right now all we have are theories. So I'm going to express those theories every opportunity I get. There's an article over at WND, one of my favorite writers on the internet right now, Bob Unruh. He wrote this article, and it isn't often that I disagree, at least with a good chunk of what he writes, but in this case I do, and I'll get to that part. It's not even a huge deal. The gist of the article is very much correct, but there's one part where I will take a little bit of an exception, so we'll get to that. But the article's titled "World's Food Security in Peril as Russia, China Have Stranglehold on Key Item," and I think anybody who's been paying attention for the last year knows what that key item is. Of course, it's fertilizer. According to the article, the world relies for most of the fertilizers used to promote crops on Russia and its ally Belarus and China. And that has alarms going off because of the stranglehold that could give those nations over the world's food. A report was posted on the Yahoo site explains, just as semiconductors have become a lightning rod for geopolitical friction, so the race for fertilizers has alerted the U.S. and its allies to a strategic dependency for an agricultural input that is a key determinant of food security. The report cites a cargo that was trapped in Rotterdam that was so precious, the United Nations intervened to get it moved to Mozambique. It was tons of fertilizer, destined overland for Malawi. This is a quote from the report over at Yahoo. It says, about 20% of Malawi's population is projected to face acute food insecurity during the lean season through March, making the use of fertilizers to grow crops all the more vital. It's one of the 48 nations in Africa, Asia, and Latin America identified by the International Monetary Fund as most at risk from the shock to food and fertilizer costs fanned by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. 1 year on, the upheaval caused to world fertilizer markets is seen by the UN as a key risk to food availability. The report explained that it is who controls fertilizer that has moved to the forefront of the political agenda. The role, and this is also according to the report, the role of fertilizer is as important as the role of seed in the country's food security. If your stomach is full, then you can defend your house, you can defend your borders, you can defend your economy. The issue for the $250 billion global fertilizer industry was complicated last year because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Ports were disrupted, shipping, banking, and insurances are more complicated, meaning ordinary deliveries haven't been reliable. And now just a quick side note, because let's call it what it is. I get it. I know I'm not, I'll give my standard disclaimer up front. I am not a Vladimir Putin apologist. I am not a supporter of Russia or a purveyor of Russian disinformation. I don't like Russia. I've considered Russia and Vladimir Putin to be our enemy since the Cold War, since the Soviet Union. Okay. When they dissolved, when everything was, the Berlin Wall fell and everything started going to normal, at no point since then have I ever considered them an ally or even a neutral party. They have always been our enemy in my worldview, in my humble opinion. Never trusted Putin, not once. But with that said, it is disingenuous to say that these fertilizer shortages are a result of the Russian invasion. Yes, Russia invaded Ukraine, and that sucks, and they should be punished for it. But the sanctions that we're using, both the United States and Europe, the sanctions are what are causing the ceasing of the flow of fertilizer and other goods from Russia to other countries, including us, including especially Europe, where they are the trading partner of Russia, as well as China, as well as Belarus. Okay. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have done something, but the idea here was that we were going to impose such harsh penalties against Russia, such harsh sanctions, and most importantly, we were going to go after them through the SWIFT payment system. That destroyed everything. Okay. It was, had we just said, you know what, this is a regional conflict, we're going to stay out of it, we're going to condemn Russia as we should, we're going to punish Russia, but we're not going to get involved, and we're not going to try to put this to an end with means that didn't work. Okay, it would be different. Hey, you know what? If the sanction had worked, I would have been the one that said, hey, you know what? I was wrong. I am so glad we did those sanctions, because Russia, after a month in, they decided, you know what? This isn't going to be as easy as we thought. These sanctions are crippling us. The ruble is dying. So let's pull out. If that had happened, I would have been like, you know what? I'm so glad I was wrong. The sanctions worked. Way to go, NATO. Way to go, Europe. Way to go, United States of America. Way to go, Joe Biden. I even probably would have said that to some extent. Okay, or at least the Biden-Harris regime for making that good decision. But as it's turned out, the sanctions have harmed us more than they've harmed Russia. The ruble did crash for like a week, and then it bounced back up, and it has been surging ever since. So that didn't work. Sanctions, yeah, those sanctions turned into this fertilizer problem. Not saying that Russia's not involved, but to say that it was Russia's fault only because we got involved in their regional conflict, no, not buying. So that part, again, mild disagreement with Bob Unruh for not mentioning that, but I get it. He's just reporting the news, and in this case, it's not that big of a deal. He'll get a pass. He's not like saying, "Oh, Ukraine, we should send more money to Ukraine." Thank God. All right. Andrei Melnichenko of Eurochem, a billion-dollar fertilizer company, blames the sanctions by. See, here we go. It's funny that now somebody's speaking some sense. Andrei Melnichenko of Eurochem, a billion-dollar fertilizer company, blames the sanctions by the European Union, but there also have been those who have been stockpiling the products since prices are spiking. And this is according to the report again. The situation is exacerbated by sanctions on potash giant Belarus, alongside the decision by China, a major producer of nitrogen and phosphate fertilizers, to impose restrictions on exports to protect domestic supply, curbs that analysts don't see being lifted until the middle of 2023 at the earliest. So you got Russia, they're saying, no, you're not getting any of our stuff. You guys are doing what you're doing. We're just trying to get our old territory back, and you guys are screwing us up. Not defending Russia for the decision either. Just like we made the wrong decision with the massive sanctions and the SWIFT move, so too did they make the wrong decision by punishing the world by withholding fertilizer. But now it looks like China's doing it, and they don't even have a reason. Okay, I mean, They don't even have a reason to do it. They're just doing it because they want to stockpile it for themselves, as they tend to do. I get it. That's their right. They're not forced to export, but in this particular case, I think they're playing that card and betting on other people's suffering instead of trying to prevent it. But it is what it is. Experts are estimating a 20% drop in food production because of the fertilizer industry issues. Now, the first thing you're going to say is, oh, there's nothing positive in that at all. And you're absolutely right. Nothing I've said so far, nothing I've read of this article, which I've read the entire thing except for the last sentence, nothing I've said can be construed as positive. There's no positive in the article thus far, but the final sentence, that is positive. And that's something that, well, it's partially positive. The idea is positive. The final sentence reads, meanwhile, Joe Biden is delivering $500 million in grants to companies to try to persuade increased production in the United States. Boom, there it is. $500 million bucks. I'm not crazy about grants, for any other, for 99% of the reasons that grants are given, I don't agree with them. Okay, maybe 97%. We'll say there's 3% of grants that are actually okay and beneficial and righteous for the nation. Otherwise, most of it is just some bureaucrat, some politician's cousin that's benefiting from all this stuff. But in this case, I do agree with this. 500 million is a lot, but still, I agree with this in theory. I agree with the general theme of this across the board. And it's not just with fertilizer, but we should be working as a nation to do everything we can to get away from having to import so much, especially from China, but not just China. We as a nation, we have the resources to create the vast majority of things that we can and should be creating, things that we used to create. We started importing because it became cheaper. We started taking advantage of all this cheap labor everywhere, cheap resources. And I get it. It made sense. It no longer makes sense. We're learning this now. We're finally, hopefully, Lord willing, starting to realize that as a nation, we have to be much more self-sustainable. We have to be able to take care of ourselves. We can't be crippled because of this, that, or the other, because we get into some skirmish with some other country. And like I said, it's not just fertilizer. Fertilizer is crucial, but that's not just it. As a matter of fact, the one that always sticks out to me as being arguably the worst is the fact that 90% of the ingredients in the pharmaceuticals that we produce and that we import here in the United States of America come from China. Now, if we do ever get into a war or a major conflict with China, perhaps over Taiwan here within the next 2 or 3 years, what are they going to do? Do you think they're going to continue to export these pharmaceuticals to us? Do they know that they have that much control? Absolutely. Absolutely. They know they position it like that. This is intentional. They have a stranglehold, far worse even than the fertilizer stranglehold that China, Russia, and Belarus have over the world. This is their big one. This is where China can basically say, literally, your people are going to die because of your actions against us. And one could argue, or at least maybe not argue, but at least speculate that perhaps that's why so many politicians who are otherwise decent politicians, so many bureaucrats, so many generals, so many leaders of every sort, so many business leaders, why everybody seems to be beholden in some way to China. The Chinese Communist Party has control, and it's not just direct control through their infiltration of the various industries and government offices across the country. It's also because they hold far too many cards, and we gave those cards to them. We did. It was us. We gave those cards to them. So we need to start wresting a lot of this stuff back from them, and that includes being able to produce our own fertilizer. There are going to be certain items that we just can't produce. We don't have lithium, for example. We need lithium to fulfill the Green New Deal's promise, the Biden promise, AOC's promise, Greta Thunberg's promise to make us drive electric vehicles, at least until the point where we run out of lithium altogether. We can't produce enough to be able to meet worldwide demand. And then all of a sudden, oh, well, I guess most people just won't have cars. But that's a whole other discussion for a whole other day. Today, I want to focus on this part. And so, lithium, we got a challenge there. A lot of the rare earths, most of the rare earths, we have major challenges there. But there are other nations that have them. It's funny because we had one. I say we had, but we were basically in control, or at least we were working with Afghanistan, which next to China has the largest reserves, the largest in their land. Their land holds the largest reserves of rare earths on the planet. We were there for 20 years. Did we get any of it? No, because we're stupid. We need to stop being stupid as a nation. And hopefully this is going to be the wake-up call that we need. This is the silver lining, the positive out of all this. Hopefully, Lord willing, if we survive all this, if we survive these existential threats, if the United States of America is still a nation in 2025, 2028, 2030, 2035, that at some point we're going to start realizing, you know what? Maybe this whole globalization thing isn't such a good idea. Maybe we need to start producing as much as we can here. Maybe we need to start becoming a net exporter. We saw what happened with oil, during the Trump, and yes, technically speaking, partially during the Obama years, but mostly during the Trump years, we went from being dependent on OPEC, dependent upon foreign oil, to all of a sudden we were able to be net exporters of oil. That's how much oil we were producing at the time before Joe Biden came along and became just a green tyrant, an idiot, a moron. And I say became, but he's always been a tyrant, an idiot, and a moron. But it wasn't until he got in the White House as president, not vice president, all of a sudden he became green as well. Crazy stuff. We need, as a nation, to become much more self-reliant. We do. We do. We need to, as people, become much more self-reliant, as individuals, as families, as communities. Forget about this whole trying to expand everything out. Let's try to bring it in. Bring in our production into the United States. Bring in our government control into the states and cities. Bring in the decision-making to that core at the family level. The hierarchy should be switched. It shouldn't be the federal government at the top, followed by the states, and then the counties and the cities, and then finally the towns and communities, and then the individuals. It should be the other way around. Self-governance. Individuals governing themselves. Working its way to where the federal government is just the bottom layer. They're the safety net. They're the last resort. A lot of people are talking about a national divorce. I get it. I understand why that concept seems good. And if we must, then we must. But I would much rather embrace the tenets of limited government federalism. I would much rather start embracing the tenets of self-reliance upon the United States, self-reliance as a nation, self-reliance as states, as cities, and as individuals. These are all goals that we can strive for, and I'm hoping, praying, begging, we as a nation, we as a people, wake up to this reality before it's too late. Thank you for watching this preview of the premium version of the J.D. Rucker Show on redvoicemedia.com/subscribe. You can try a week out for $1. You get my premium shows, the uncensored shows, as well as the shows from other people, other amazing show hosts. So check it out. redvoicemedia.com/subscribe. And please be sure to use promo code JDR. That way I know that I'm reaching you guys. That'd be fantastic.